Hi, everybody. David Noor back with you for another episode of our Intelligent Growth with my partner, Jen Cords. Hello, Jen.
Hi, Nor. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. Good to see you and excited that we just wrapped up this mini series on challenges facing, let's see, chief marketing officers, chief revenue officers, chief customer officers around driving growth in these challenging times. How were the series for you?
I thought it was great. We covered a ton of ground, and it would be really impactful for anybody to go back and listen to the whole series or just the one that applies to their role most specifically. But I thought we covered some really good content.
And for our audience, if you may be a new listener or you haven't had a chance to catch the previous episodes, particularly in the video version, we often share our customer lifecycle journey. We have a global research study going on right now to really understand both really great strengths that companies have in attracting and then retaining great clients, but also the challenges. And we got some great data points. We're going to be publishing a Forbes article and the research insight soon. So would encourage you to check that out. Also want to remind you of our private online community called the Nor Forum. If you just go to norgroup.com/forum, we're there every day sharing ideas, insights, perspectives. We encourage you not just to be a passive consumer of this content. Jen and I already know a lot of this stuff. It really is for you, but an active participant in asking questions and follow up comments. In the forum, we also share copies of the presentations and research material that we believe will be really useful to you. So, Jen, in this transition one, before mini series seem to work well for us. So, in this transitional episode before the next one, I thought it was really important, and you and I talked about tying those three individual episodes together in terms of the relationships between marketing, sales, and customer success as led by each of those respective leaders. And then a topic that I know you're passionate about, which is really a set of North Star metrics that the leaders can really all get behind and really start to build what we call a we culture, not just us and them. Comment on those two topics for a second.
Sure. So, the challenges that we addressed in each one of those functional areas could be a lot for anybody to take on. And a lot of the clients and environments that we walk into have the functional areas focused on themselves alone. And so they're not necessarily having a broader view or even insights into other areas of the organization. And so that goes to your comment about a we environment versus a individual focus environment, or what we call like the us versus them type environment. And so making sure that there's cohesion across all of those departments is really important to make sure that they're all moving in the right direction, and that they can have clean handoffs in that customer lifecycle journey, because it's like a relay race. So that culture is really important to drive that cohesion. And then on the flip side, those metrics, every department is going to have their own metrics that they're going to need to report on. At the same time, there are some of those universal metrics that need to be understood from an executive level all the way through the organization, to make sure that there's the visibility and understanding of where the organization is trying to go to, and what mechanics, what levers each individual department can be focused on to help drive that growth in an intelligent way.
Uh, I really like this topic of the relationships between the individual leaders as well as a common set of metrics that they can all agree on, they all believe in, they all support. And as you said, anytime we go into in a company and we hear us and them, right? I don't know what marketing spending that money on because I'm not getting leads, or our funnel isn't where it needs to be, or my job is to just kind of get new logos and close the business. And customer success feels like a redheaded stepchild and almost like an after fact. You kind of you experience particularly as an outsider, that we're not on the same page. We're not clicking as a team. I often use the analogy of we're not rowing with the same velocity and veracity in the same direction. And you feel it. You feel it in the culture. Conversely, you go in and you hear that's a we challenge. That's a we opportunity. That's a we something we need to address. How can I help? A lot of leaders you and I meet talk about servant leadership. The real ones ask, how can I help? What obstacles can I remove from your path, particularly in challenging economic times, to get us to the results we're after?
Excuse me. I'd also add to that that the tone that the executive team takes will cascade down to their respective teams. And so, I mean, we both have kids, and kids watch and observe everything that you're doing versus just listen to the things that you say. And so setting a good example, how to interact with other departments, how you talk about those other departments is also really important from a cultural perspective, but that's what your team is also then going to do. And they're going to be reinforced by the things that you say. So if in some meetings while they're there, you're putting on one front, but then in just functional department meetings, you're talking about them in a different way, that sends a mixed message, and it's not going to resonate in the way that you hope that it will. And then the other thing that we've seen going into some of these organizations is everybody has a version of the metrics that really doesn't help drive the business forward. And I mean, you've brought it up before that sales has their lens on it, and they don't believe the metrics that marketing is talking about. And they both have two different numbers as far as what the funnel and the pipeline is. And so it really just highlights the lack of cohesion between these roles.
So you're exactly right in that the demeanor of the executives cascade down. It also has enormous visibility at a peer level and relationships up. One of the things I'm doing is I'm coaching executives on how to manage those relationships up to, say, the board or across business units or in different environments, internal or external, and the way they speak of their colleagues. In some ways reminds me of ideally the way you speak of your family members, right? If you're belittling, if that cousin Sue is dumb as dirt, that's not exactly the best case scenario to talk about a colleague, because it gets recognized, and it doesn't put you as the leader in the best possible kind of position, best possible light. That's probably not the leadership brand you want. More importantly, again, how do you expect, as you alluded to, how do you expect your subordinates to treat their counterparts in other parts of the organization? If they kind of watch you, as our kids watch us, how you kind of interact with how you, and I'm the first person to say, if you don't feel as a leader, particularly a revenue leader, frustrated, disappointed, angry, let down, any of those, if you don't let yourself feel those, pretty soon you're not going to feel anything. So it's important to feel those emotions. It's also critical to separate those emotions from your actions, from your decision making, from your interactions, from your relationships. Because particularly in relationships, intentions don't count nearly as much as actions. So you didn't intend to offend. You didn't intend to make someone else look bad. You didn't intend to do that. But when you speak in a harsh tone, or you're angry, or you're short, or you're curt, whatever it is, it shows. It's just like it shows when you're supportive. Just like it shows when, you know what, we didn't deliver the funnel we needed to. Let's figure out collectively how we do that. And it's a we and not those useless people in marketing, as an example.
Right. And so with that, in this episode, we want to touch on the relationships between those functional leaders and why it's important to build those relationships. as well. And so in our last episode, we touched on the CMO, the CRO, and the CCO environment.
Yeah, and the challenges that each of them face in kind of how to work closely together and how to interact. And you and I are talking about the relationship challenges and opportunities amongst all of them. And one of the things that's really important, Jan, and you and I have talked about this, is that one of the misperceptions about relationships is purely external, right? Customers, vendors, investors, partners outside of this place. You've heard me talk a lot about internal relationships, and particularly in the revenue group, really critical with revenue leadership that they build and nurture and sustain a great relationship. And there's 5 kind of areas that, or 5 reasons, particularly again in revenue growth, that I tend to think a lot about, that relationships are an enabler of. And I thought you and I could talk about those 5, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So number one, and I'm just for the audience, I'm going to rattle off 5, and then Jen and I will talk about each of them. Number one is really in alignment of the enterprise growth goals, objectives. The key thing we found, the key challenge and opportunity we found is CMO, CRO, chief kind of customer success, chief customer officer, all play a really crucial role in that growth. But because they focus on different stages of that journey, you get often silos. You often get that, this is my area of focus. And only when they work together, only when they collaborate, only when they align their goals, their strategies, the activities, you're going to get that seamless customer experience from the initial marketing all the way to the revenue generation and growth. We've talked about that in that customer lifecycle journey, all the way to that long-term viability of that customer and their success. That alignment really builds a cohesive approach that maximizes the impact of each of these functional groups. Let me pause. Does that make sense? Does that resonate?
That does make sense. And having that alignment across the teams, not only from a cultural perspective, but also just a goals perspective, really helps drive the business forward, because then you don't have competing priorities between those different functions.
And this leads nicely into one of the North Star metrics that you're, and again, I know, passionate about. So talk about, we've mentioned this in the mini series, that 360-degree view of the customer. Because when I talk about alignment across marketing, sales, and customer success, that's in essence what I'm talking about, is how well do we understand fully and holistically that customer?
Yeah, in today's business, not only SaaS businesses, but all businesses, having that 360-degree view of the customer, their touch points, what content they're consuming, what problems they may be having, who's their internal champion, who's their buyer, all of those things are really important across the entire organization, and ensuring that every touch point, regardless of what department it is, marketing, sales, or customer success, is continuing to provide value on a recurring basis. And it's not just, we've closed this deal, we get them onboarded, and then we're not going to talk to them for the next year. It's that recurring interaction between the customer and the organization, because we've talked about it before, that there aren't relationships between logos, and it's the relationship between people. And so making sure that the people feel supported and understood, and their problems are getting solved by the solution your company brings, is really going to be important to the future success and the future long-term viability of that customer.
So give us some examples of what are some of the metrics that you think about in that 360-degree view of a customer.
Yeah, so the metrics, it kind of boils down to just three big buckets, and then there's individual metrics in each one. So revenue insights is probably the first bucket that reports would go into. And then ICP versus ideal relationship profile would be the second big bucket. And then the third bucket would be efficiency of pipeline. And like I said, within each one of those, there are specific reports. So for example, in the revenue insights, it's not only understanding completeness of data, customer acquisition costs, average touches, things like that, but it's also repeat business and wallet share and how much the immediate impact is valued versus their long-term potential. And so just knowing what each one of those are is really going to be important to drive that business. And each function, marketing, sales, and customer success, can contribute to that metric. And so that's why having it as a North Star and having those three departments focused on it is really important.
Which lends itself nicely to the next relationship piece, which is really integration of customer insights. One of the things that I've noticed in working with different organizations is every one of these individuals in each of these functions, marketing, sales, and customer success, have incredible interactions with customers, about customers, insights that they gather. Yet there seldom is any kind of a feedback loop mechanism, any kind of a collection environment for those insights. So marketing puts on a trade show, and people come by the trade booth and or the exhibit hall or at the event, and you talk to them and you get some insights from that conversation. Sales reps obviously are calling on accounts. They get competitive information. Customer success learns an enormous amount about the ecosystem in which we have to integrate our product or our solution into. So each of these functions are gaining incredible insights. And if the relationships of trust and accountability and truthfulness and an environment that's okay with sharing bad news of, listen, guys, we sold them on a solution that's just not going to work, or it's not going to fit in their environment, or they don't believe it, or this project's in trouble because of these reasons. If you don't have an environment, if you don't have the relationship between these functional teams to talk through those challenges without leaders getting defensive, without leaders pretending like I'm dragging their mother into the conversation, just since it was just Mother's Day, you're not gonna really hit your full stride as a revenue team. Comments on that, and then I'd love to have you jump into either more of the revenue insights, or I love that ICP to the ideal relationship profile.
Yeah, so just to comment on that visibility and those insights, a lot of times these functional groups report on their data, but it's generating a report. It's not actually learning from the report, and your operations team really should be that agnostic third party almost voice in the process to look at the data and what it's saying, but then help the leaders understand what does that actually mean to the business. And so having not only the report is really important, but then what does it tell us? What can we learn from it? What things can we change related to whatever this process is really, really important as well. And then to your point, the feedback loop, it's one of the things that my team and I work really hard with a lot of our clients on, is to create those feedback loops between the departments. Because like you said, customer success is having conversations and they have visibility into the customer's ecosystem that maybe sales didn't dig deep enough into, or the sales process doesn't ask those questions. And so it doesn't uncover some of those future potential upsells or cross sells and needs of the customer that your company can address. And so making sure that that information is shared across the organization is really important, because that customer insights can then also inform what marketing is going to provide in the future, what sort of things this company is going to be interested in, what sort of offers to make to them into the future, what sort of educational things to talk about. And so having that feedback loop across all three of these functions is absolutely essential to providing that deeper value and not being viewed just as a vendor to these customers.
Love that. And it, again, lends itself really nicely to the next kind of the relationship component that I tend to think about, which is the effective prospecting and conversion. So I believe the relationship between those three functions can really help just that environment alone. So, as you mentioned, what problems does our solution really solve? Who does it solve for? Who's that primary, if not secondary? You can argue some value in tertiary, but primary person we should go talk to. How do we tag team? How do we really go together? You know that I spent some time at a private equity firm, and when we saw executives, you would intentionally ask a question, and you're looking for a couple of dynamics. One, who had the authority, who had the credibility to answer it? And two, were their responses supportive of each other? I'm looking for the relationship dynamics between, yeah, I may ask a sales question, but it's seldom just a sales question. It also has marketing and customer success implications. So when I talk about, tell me about the right prospect, tell me about how you're going to attract, retain, and convert them. Tell me about what happens after the sale. Tell me about the relationship you're trying to nurture in that account so they become a referenceable account, or ideally one that refers and recommends you, one that speaks at your customer conference, one that will go to conferences with you and talk about the impact of your solution. Those are the types of relationships you're looking for, specifically in terms of the prospects we should focus on and the conversion of those prospects into not just first time transactional customers, but long term viable relationships. Comment on metrics that you believe help identify the best prospects and conversion opportunities.
Sure. So one of the metrics, a lot of people are, a lot of companies are focused on the ICP, the ideal customer profile. We like calling it the ideal relationship profile because it really is about their needs and the solutions that our company provides. At the same time, what we see in some of our client work is that they're not focused enough on who they don't want to be talking to. So it's that power of deduction of, we have no business talking to these people at all because they're either never going to buy, we can't ever address their needs. And so ensuring that you have both sides of the coin addressed, who you do want to talk to, but then also who you don't want to talk to, and either give them more of a self-service solution, like just give them resources to learn more about your company or product, because maybe they're a student and it's a potential future business whenever they go and get a job like after they graduate, or it's just never a space that you guys are going to play in, but they're interested, they're coming kicking the tires. You don't want to ignore them. At the same time, what you mentioned about the sort of parameters and who you're talking to, sometimes there's different levels of who you're talking to. There's the internal champion, the person that your solution is actually going to solve a problem for them, a pain point for them. But then there's somebody potentially above them that is the one who's actually going to write the checks. And so you need to also make sure that there's content and talking points for both of those audiences, that they help see the value that your solution brings from both sides. From the money ROI side, this is going to help your team be more efficient in XYZ way, but also this is what we know you're feeling. This is the pain that you're feeling. This is how we solve it. And so making sure you're talking at both levels is really important. And so one of the things that we focus on report wise is completeness of data, titles that we have, engagement with content, the average number of touches, not only by channel, but also by segment, because each one of those buyers, mid-market, small business, enterprise, they could have different buying groups. And so making sure you're addressing all of those and having that visibility into who's engaging where is really important to make sure that your funnel is healthy.
And when you do that, for our audience, we increasingly, as we've been talking about the subscription economy and the recurring revenue model, and it isn't just that initial transaction. And you've also heard us in previous episode talk about, it's very sexy to talk about top line growth, right? New logos, and the top line is certainly interesting to talk about. The real opportunity is churn. The real opportunity is recurring revenue. The real opportunity is, how do we focus on fewer relationships, but relationships where we're a great fit, relationships where they are dramatically better off because of us, relationships that their business is materially impacted because we're working with them, and that's a fine line between the short-term transactions that we need that short-term revenue. But one of the things that I tend to focus on is the relationship, again, between marketing, sales, customer success at the leadership level, cascading down, and a unified front up, right? Leveling up relationships is really maximizing the customer lifetime value. So what I love to see is, and I'd welcome your comments on this, of reporting an analysis that says, how effectively are we gaining more mind share, gaining more wallet share at that account, with that relationship, with that client. We're now in several different business units, or we're now in several different geographies, or we started working with this group and we had such great success with them that they introduced us to another group, or now we're working with their international team. And so that lifetime value to me is just such an incredible indication of the relationship working and maturing and really fulfilling on both sides. And I'd welcome your ideas or your thoughts on what are the key, again, North Star metrics that all three functions can focus on to drive that lifetime value.
Yeah, so I definitely agree that the customer lifetime value is long-term going to be more viable and more impactful than just net new logos. I mean, every business needs to add new logos to grow revenue. At the same time, retaining the logos that you have is also really important, because if you're putting 10 in the top and you're losing 10 out the bottom, it's net zero. So you're really not growing. And so then it just becomes this revolving door. And driving that value that you were talking about, David, that the customers become your advocates, is really important, because they're the ones that you can do case studies. They're the impact that you bring to that organization. They are going to want to talk about it. They love talking about themselves and how you then helped them be better. And so those are the relationships that you really need to grow and nurture. And some of the things that you can do from a reporting standpoint is actually like asking customer satisfaction rate, looking at your NPS scores, and following up with somebody who maybe says, no, it wasn't a great experience, looking at average time to resolution. And so if they put in a support ticket or they ask a question, how quickly are they getting an answer back? And how complete is that answer? Are they having to talk and to 5 or 6 different departments before they get some sort of resolution? So those are all metrics that can be looked at from a holistic point of perspective, and really impacted mainly from the customer success side. But it's really important for sales to be aware of that as well, because they're the ones that should also be touching base with this customer, not just once a year. There should be QBRs, quarterly business reviews. How are we doing? Ask the questions, but then also listen to the answer, and then make material impact to how that customer feels. If they're not getting the responses that they need, maybe go to support and help support realize that this customer is really valuable to you, and how can you help remove some of those barriers to get the customers the answers that they need. So be the internal advocate for that customer is one way that that long-term value can be felt by the vendor or the customer.
One of the aspects of our business I'm really excited about is standing up this BizOps practice, because it's not just the data, it's not just data from disparate sources and silos that you and your team tend to uncover, but whether we use Tableau or Snowflake or some of these other platforms, it's really bringing a holistic view, and much more so. And the way you opened this conversation was, I've sat in meetings where different people bring different reports to the same meeting, and the believability, the viability, the credibility of those reports are always a challenge and a discussion. And so what I get excited about in the relationship between marketing, sales, customer success is data driven. I don't want to take anything away from intuition. I don't want to take anything away from the experience of some of these incredible leaders you and I have met, but nothing replaces that data driven communication, decision making, and problem solving. And what I've seen when it comes to relationships, in many ways, it takes the emotional part. It takes that highly emotionally charged part of, well, damn it, I'm right, and here's why. Or, well, that's just how I feel about that. Well, that's great. I appreciate how you feel. And I don't want to minimize that. I don't want to take anything away from that. But the data shows us otherwise. The data shows us that we're not getting the traffic, or we're not getting the conversion, or we're selling them on something they'll never be able to implement. And they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the resources, they don't have the internal expertise. So we've got to either partner with somebody of professional services or create our own to ensure that what we're promising, in fact, can come to realization. And data-driven communication, decision-making, problem solving is something I'm coaching every leader to make sure they practice themselves in their relationships, demand, enable, empower in their teams, and really build the culture around of gut feel, intuition, how you feel, the fact that you've been in this business since Jesus was selling. All that stuff is fantastic. What does the data show us? And how do we leverage the data in a holistic, in a believable, credible manner to make those decisions, to solve the problems, to address what we need to do in our go-to-market strategy?
Well, one of the things, yeah, sorry. One of the things that I'd say about that is the intuition and gut feel really should go into your culture of experimentation. A lot of organizations, they plan great marketing campaigns and they put it out in the world, and then they don't necessarily look at what it's telling them or learn from those. They start churning out, and there's a lot of stuff. They mistaken the volume of what they're doing and their activities with the actual impact of what they're doing. And so having a culture of experimentation. So a sales rep says, in my past experience, we've done XYZ. Okay, great. Let's create an A/B test or a way to see if that's going to resonate with our audience. And then look at the data. What does it tell us? Those insights, and then make tweaks as you go. And so that culture of experimentation across the board of marketing, sales, and customer success really should be supported, not only at the executive level, but also for the teams underneath, and be willing to fail and try things. And I always coach people to say, you fail faster. So try things, but if it's not working, don't just continue trying to force it to work through brute force. Look at what it's telling you and change tack if need be. And so having that data to help inform what you're deciding on, what you're doubling down on, is really going to be important. And then beyond that, those decisions and that data also then allows you to create a repeatable, scalable process. Because if every single sale is done just by the gut feel of the sales rep, you're not going to be able to do more of that and attract more of the same type of customer. And so using the data in a way that you can coach everybody and have everybody realize that success is really important as well.
So just to build on that, the reason we call it relationship economics is to combine this fuzzy, nebulous thing that everybody understood to be important relationships with more the hard facts, more the definitive data, more the scientific approach, if you will. And so one of the things that I talk to a lot of leaders about is particularly marketing, sales, and customer success. What if they thought more like scientists? What if they brought a more scientific approach to their efforts? And let's not eliminate, but reduce some of that gut feel and intuition. And I'm going to measure our go-to-market strategy with direction of the wind today, with formulating hypotheses, with conducting experiments at the A/B testing you mentioned, with collecting and analyzing their data. One of the biggest frustrations is we get reports, but we don't schedule time to analyze or discuss or debate in a respectful way the insights, hopefully the actionable insights from those reports. And we don't make enough time to think, embracing that growth mindset. Here's what I believe, but I'm willing to be proven wrong. I'm willing to see another approach, another side to how we go to market. And I'm curious enough to pursue a better approach, a different approach. One of the sad things that you start to see in seasoned leaders, this is old school. I tell my kids, they didn't paint on the gray hair, right? This is, they were selling on the street, and they've, careers have progressed, is one of complacency, is one of when they stop being really curious about and really looking for insights into why something is happening, not just what's happening. That's when they become complacent. That's when they become, less advantageous to their biggest asset, which I believe is the relationships. And the use of technology, use of automation, leveraging insights to iterate and optimize, document, and learn. These are the things that enrich relationships, and absolutely an environment where you and your practice and your team thrives in creating a single source of truth and funneling multiple data sources together, and then reporting and analyzing insights from those data sets.
Well, yeah, and I'd have to agree with you that most organizations are not either taking the time to actually look at the reports and what is it telling them, but it's also the leaders either lack the know-how to ask better questions, or they don't know what questions to ask, and the teams underneath them don't know to just help them understand. I guess the best way to put that is like the operations team is seeing something happening and they just generate a report, but they don't necessarily provide insights or recommendations on here's some things we could do to improve XYZ, because the culture that is set within the organization isn't one of experimentation or being willing to be bad or ask questions or just that curiosity that you mentioned. And it's those leaders who, they don't want to be perceived as they don't know everything, but the best leaders always surround themselves with people who are maybe smarter than them or smarter in a different area than them. And so it complements the things that they know and what they bring to the table. And so being willing to have sort of that symbiotic relationship between marketing, sales, customer success, but then also the supporting teams underneath is really important. And so it comes back to those relationships that you were talking about, David, and supporting those around you. And the best leaders will ask their teams and their colleagues, how can I help you? Like what impediments can I get out of your way to get us to the result that we're looking for? They don't have to be the one necessarily leading the charge or with the answer. They're the one that is leading from the back, if you will, and just moving the pieces out of the way that need to be out of the way and the blockers to get everybody to the finish line.
So just to wrap up this session, I would encourage our audience, if you haven't watched the previous mini series on kind of the challenges faced by chief marketing officers, chief revenue officers, chief customer officers. The intent of this one was to really emphasize the strategic relationship between those three functions and really reiterate the incredible value of what we call set of North Star metrics that all three functional areas can believe in, should get behind and support, and as Jen alluded to, really collaborate to achieve. So as your organization faces increased competition, there is, and we're blessed because we see a lot of different size and types of companies across a multitude of industries. There's increased competition, not just from competitors you know, but competitors you don't know. There's unequivocally, we're seeing changing at an accelerated rate customer behaviors and expectations. We're seeing increased complexity in the sales, marketing, customer success tech stack, and really the integration of these technologies. We're seeing increased decision by committees. So the sales cycle length, the complexity of it, particularly enterprise sales, is just getting to a point where it's just dragging on. And in an effort to mitigate risk, there's greater and the ripple effect of a lot of these technology solutions, greater complexity in that sales process, retaining, expanding, as Jen mentioned, not just net new logos, but how do we increase the retention and the customer lifecycle value? And then certainly last but not least, we got talent issues, data-driven decision making. All of these things make the relationships between those functions not just more critical than ever, but those metrics, really the connective tissue, really the safety net between those functions, all contributing to revenue growth. Jen, comments on those and any final metrics you wanna address?
I would just say that if today you know that there's silos or you haven't met with your counterparts in the other organizations, I would definitely say schedule time to just go ask questions, hear what they're doing, be curious about what the other departments are doing, but then also look at the metrics that you are tracking and see what insights you can glean from them that could be impactful to the other functions. So if you're in marketing, what things are you seeing that could help sales and customer success, and proactively reach out to those departments and provide that insight of, we've been running this campaign and here's some things you should know, or here's some talking points that your salespeople could use, and vice versa. And so I would just say, continue to be curious and ask good questions, and really look at ways to remove some of that friction and those silos between the various departments.
Those of you who know me know that I'm a collector of stories, and I love, and I want to wrap up this session with a story. I don't know if you've seen the movie Remember the Titans with Denzel Washington as the head coach of this Virginia football team that they went perfect. And there's one scene I distinctly remember that the defensive coordinator, his assistant coach, looks a bunch of film. They're playing a really tough rival, takes those plays to a math teacher at their school, and with a high probability they identify the plays that they're likely to run, and the defensive coordinator's handing Denzel Washington's character, who's the head coach who runs offense, a set of offensive plays. And that reminds me of exactly what Jen said. There are incredible customer-centric nuggets in marketing, sales, and customer success. And really forward-thinking leaders are much more proactive with those insights. They're much more servant in how can we leverage these insights that we're seeing across the entire organization to really drive our revenue growth efforts forward. So again, we hope this session on we opportunities and really North Star metrics for revenue growth leaders has been of interest and value to you, encourage you to come join us in our forum, norgroup.com/forum. Jen and I are live each Tuesday at noon Eastern to share additional sessions. We're excited to go into another mini series. We like doing these short mini series where we share unique perspectives on type. We've got some great ones coming up from total addressable market and addressing those to we're going to dive deeper into this idea of strategic relationships. We're going to talk about building a culture of coaching across marketing, sales, and customer success. So a lot of great episodes coming up. We hope you'll continue to join us. We're live on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, the Nor Group accounts, each Tuesday at noon Eastern. You can also listen to these as podcasts wherever you consume podcasts. On behalf of Jen and myself, we're the Nor Group. Thanks for joining us. Look forward to seeing you next time.